Have you ever played that game where you whisper a secret to one person, and by the time it gets to the end of the line, it's a completely different, totally bonkers story? Well, imagine that game, but with life or death consequences. That is a pretty good starting point for understanding one of the most bizarre and chilling chapters in American history, the Salem Witch Trials. Let's travel back in time. The year is 1692. The place is Salem Village, Massachusetts. Forget your cozy lattes and high-speed internet. This is a Puritan community. Life is hard, the winters are brutal, and people are deeply, deeply religious. They believe the devil is as real as their next-door neighbor, and that he is constantly trying to tempt good folks into doing his dirty work. This fear isn't just a spooky campfire story, it's a core part of their worldview. Salem Village was also a pretty tense place. There were land disputes between families, arguments over the new minister, Reverend Samuel Paris, and a general feeling of anxiety lingering in the cold New England air. It was a pressure cooker, just waiting for a reason to explode. And that reason came in the dead of winter, in the most unlikely of places, the kitchen of Reverend Paris. His 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and his 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, started acting strange, really strange. They were having fits, contorting their bodies, screaming and complaining of being pricked with pins. A local doctor was called, and when he couldn't find any physical cause for their behavior, he gave a diagnosis that would change everything. The evil hand is upon them. In other words, witchcraft. Now, remember Reverend Paris's household. He had an enslaved woman from the Caribbean named Tituba. Pressured by the Reverend and other town leaders, the terrified girls named Tituba as one of the people afflicting them. They also pointed fingers at 2 other women who didn't quite fit the Puritan mold: Sarah Good, a homeless beggar, and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who rarely attended church. Initially, both Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne denied everything, but Tituba, likely under extreme duress and possibly trying to save her own skin by telling the magistrates what they wanted to hear, confessed. And she didn't just confess. She wove a fantastical tale of red cats, black dogs, and a tall man from Boston who wanted her to sign the devil's book. She claimed there were other witches in Salem Village working alongside her. This confession was like throwing gasoline on a fire. It confirmed the town's deepest fears. There wasn't just one witch, there was a whole coven. Suddenly, the accusations began to fly. The original afflicted girls were joined by others, forming a core group of accusers. They would writhe and scream in the courtroom whenever an accused person was brought before the magistrates. They claimed to see the spectral shapes of the accused pinching, biting, and tormenting them. It was high drama, and for the people of Salem, it was terrifyingly real. Think about it. If a group of people all started screaming that your ghost was attacking them, how could you possibly prove your innocence? It was your word against theirs. And in this climate of fear, the accusers were always believed. The list of the accused grew longer and longer. It was no longer just outcasts, respected church members, wealthy landowners, anyone could be named. Bridget Bishop, a tavern owner known for her colorful clothing and somewhat scandalous reputation, was the first to be tried and executed. She was hanged on Gallows Hill on June 10, 1692. Her death didn't stop the hysteria, it validated it. People thought, see, we're getting rid of the evil. Throughout that summer, the trials continued. The local jail was overflowing. People were confessing, often to save themselves. Because confessing witches weren't executed, they were expected to name other witches. This created a horrifying chain reaction. To save your life, you had to condemn someone else. One of the most heartbreaking stories is that of Giles Corey, an 81-year-old farmer. He refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty, likely to ensure his property would pass to his sons instead of being confiscated by the state. The punishment for refusing to plead was horrific. He was pressed to death under heavy stones over 2 days. His last words were reportedly, "More weight." He died, but he never confessed. But how did it all end? As the autumn leaves began to turn, some people started to have serious doubts. The accusations were getting more and more outlandish. Even the governor's wife was accused. A prominent minister named Increase Mather argued that it was better for 10 suspected witches to escape and for one innocent person to be condemned. He powerfully criticized the use of spectral evidence, the accuser's claims of seeing invisible spirits. After all, couldn't the devil disguise himself as an innocent person? Finally, in October 1692, Governor William Phipps ordered a halt to the proceedings and dissolved the special court. He established a new superior court that disallowed spectral evidence. Without it, the cases fell apart. The remaining prisoners were released over the next several months. The madness was over, but the damage was done. In total, 19 people had been hanged. Giles Corey was pressed to death, and several others died in prison. An entire community was left shattered, grappling with the guilt and shame of what they had done. Years later, many of the key figures involved, including some of the accusers and judges, publicly apologized. The colony held a day of fasting and prayer for the tragedy. In 1711, the colony passed a bill restoring the good names of many of the victims and providing financial restitution to their families. It was an admission that a terrible injustice had occurred. So what can we learn from the Salem Witch Trials? It's a powerful lesson about the dangers of mass hysteria, religious extremism, and what can happen when fear and prejudice are allowed to run rampant. It shows how easy it is for a society to turn on its own, scapegoating people who are different or unpopular. The story of Salem isn't just a dusty old history lesson. It's a timeless warning. It reminds us to question authority, to demand real evidence, and to always stand up for the truth, especially when it's unpopular. It's a chilling reminder of what can happen when we let fear cloud our judgment. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today to explore this dark but important piece of history. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the past. Drop a comment below what part of this story shocks you the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.